Sorry in advance. I was drunk most of the time during what happened, so I don't remember every detail. When I was 18 and firstly broken up with my way older boyfriend, I basically went crazy with dating guys. At the time, I also dressed very goth, even going as far as to wear a real corset and trench coat, mostly just enjoying the attention. One particular afternoon, my friend/roommate at the time decided to eat at a local Japanese restaurant with both of us, all dressed up. Our waiter was a mediocre skinny white guy who clearly was a little alternative, but it was hard to tell really with the uniform. We joked about me leaving my phone number on the receipt or something, so I hyped myself up and did so. Late that night, he had sent me a text. We talked for a few days, never really having a right time to meet up as I worked 40 minutes away from where I lived. He mentioned the boots he wore meant a lot to him, and some other odd things that just seemed like edgy jokes. One really late night, coming home, I was texting and driving, as any 18-year-old does, and we decided to meet up. My stupid self invited him over to my apartment, where it was just me and the roommate who had been with me before. Our other two roommates were not home. At first, it was fine, because I was already drunk, so I would just let him rant about whatever he wanted. He went on about his life, going to jail, medical bills, his parents, etc. Eventually, he asked me if I wanted to see his tattoos, and I said sure. He lifted up his shirt, and not only could I see the handgun tucked in his waistband, but also his multiple badly covered up Nazi tattoos. One was even slightly covered with a banana. I don't know what it was, but I simply decided the best way to deal with the situation was to appease him. I don't remember exactly every detail, because it was over 2 years ago and I was drunk, but he ended up pulling his gun out and putting it to my head, asking me if I was scared. I was immensely confused and tried to call his bluff, saying I wasn't, which got him to put it away for a while. When we went to hook up in my messy ass room, he pulled it on me again, saying he wanted to do it with it out. I got mad and tried to fight him off me and get it away from my head. Of course, I wasn't as strong as him, and he hit me in the arm with it. Which that shit hurt, cause it was a hard hit. When I finally got him off of me, and he realized I was pissed, not scared, he started acting like a crackhead, saying I was crazy for not caring about him pulling a gun on me. He ran off, jumping the fence of the apartment complex, and not even taking his car that he had come in. In the morning, his car was gone, and I had a large bruise from where he had hit me. While to me, it is a funny story, I now realize how bad it could have ended up. So, to the waiter from the Japanese restaurant, let's not meet. When I first got out of the army, I was in a relationship with a guy in 3rd Ranger Battalion. Let's call him Jim. Jim Reedus. He and I had an apartment together, and I thought I loved him. So instead of going back to my home in Nebraska, I stayed in Columbus, Georgia. Our relationship started out with him being what I thought was protective over me. Even though I was very attractive at the time, I had very low self-esteem because of an assault I experienced while I was living in the barracks, and the bullying I endured afterward. Things moved very quickly. In fact, we were inseparable from the night we met. Anytime another man looked at me, he would get very confrontational towards the guy. I felt very safe and protected by this. It made me feel special. I thought he must really value me if he would get so upset by a guy looking my way. Soon, we would be out at the bar. He would get hammered every time and act very nasty towards me if he thought I was looking at another guy. This would cause bitter fights, and I would always end up in a fetal position in bed, sobbing. But still I stayed. The next day, he would always apologize, making excuses about it being because he was so drunk. But then he would proceed to explain to me why what I had done was wrong. It wasn't long before I found myself totally isolated from my friends and family. Because he was so insecure, he made me take all of my phone calls on speakerphone. My family begged me to leave, but I was afraid I couldn't get by on my own. Then one night, We came home from the bar in the usual fashion, him screaming in my face and me sobbing. I told him I was going to get a room at a motel, and he lost his freaking mind. He yanked the keys out of the ignition and threw them into the wood line. He then got out of my car and proceeded to kick in the front quarter panel of my car. He used so much force that the hinges to the passenger door were bent. I told the insurance company it was a hit and run, or I never would have been able to get the damage fixed. He screamed at me to get inside the apartment, but I couldn't unlock the door without my keys, which he blamed me for. He then grabbed me and started shoving me into the front door, first by my shoulders, then with his hands around my throat, screaming, "Can't you see how much I love you?" I rasped, No, I can't." He let go, and I fell to the ground in a heap. That night, I had finally had enough. I was finally so angry that I didn't feel afraid anymore. That morning while he was sleeping it off, I began to make plans. I started by telling him he had to leave and move back into the barracks. When he refused, I had to get his chain of command involved to make him leave the apartment and go back to live in the barracks. On the couch or in the street, didn't matter, just as long as it wasn't with me. He stalked me mercilessly. I filed for an OP, but he bullied me into dropping it. I knew I would never be free from him if I stayed. So my parents sent me some money via Western Union. This was in 2002. With the money, I rented a Penske truck and a trailer. Got help from my neighbor guy friend to load it up as soon as the sun set. And I brought it from where I had hidden it. My best chance was to leave under the cover of darkness. I was really sick that night. I was running a fever of around 103 degrees, but I knew it had to be then. It couldn't wait. I just told myself that I just had to get out of the city limits. Then I could pull over and sleep a little bit. I figured I would just drive as much as I could and then rest when I couldn't push any harder. I put my puppy in the cab of the truck with me, towed my car behind the truck, and left. I don't know how, except through divine intervention, but I somehow managed to drive nonstop, from Fort Benning, Georgia, to my parents' home in rural Nebraska. I stopped only for fuel, at which time I would feed, water, and walk my little dog, Scruffy, use the facilities, and get what food and drink I could afford on my meager budget. I drove 14 hours and pulled into my parents' drive around 10 a.m. I crashed on their old couch and slept for nearly 24 hours straight. I still hope for nothing but pain and suffering for him. He turned me on to pills, then coke, then crack, all while he was on active duty. He was a scumbag of a soldier and a man, if you could even call him that. He reached out to me on social media a couple years ago. I told him what a piece of steaming shit he was, and I told him to rot in hell. Felt amazing, even after all these years, to say that to him, and to have him be the one stammering. I'm actually glad he reached out to me, and gave me the opportunity to verbally rip him into shreds. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Jim. But let's not meet again. I was just a crazy sophomore in high school, and I felt head over heels for the new quiet kid, and thought he was my forever. Crazy, but I would actually go on marrying him down the road, just 1 week after graduation. High school sweethearts. Looking back now, I can see how many red flags I noticed, but ignored, because I was young, and eagerly wanting to be grown up. Fast forward. The night before my wedding day, I was going over last-minute wedding details with my mom, who is easily one of the most caring and selfless people I know. So bless my sweet mama's heart when I asked her if she'd be mad if I decided I didn't want to go through with the wedding. The wedding was the next day. But, me being me, Mom thought I was messing with her. I couldn't tell her the truth of what was going on, so I took a deep breath and forced a believable chuckle. She genuinely thought I was just pulling another one of my jokes. I went on to finally tell her the truth, almost a year after I escaped him, and she still feels bad for not taking it seriously. No one knew what was going on behind closed doors, but it makes sense. I was honestly his biggest PR team. Only 2 hours passed since saying I do's. He was throwing me out of the truck in my parents' driveway, cussing and yelling that he wanted a divorce, recklessly driving off. So much for all that honeymoon phase. I ran inside and my dad came out of the bedroom, and he can't understand a word I'm saying, but he is trying to basically ask me what was happening. And I say it as clear as I could while uncontrollably sobbing. He left me. Could he? On our honeymoon. My dad is pissed, but then relaxed and tried to rationalize the situation. Like maybe he forgot something, pulling a bad joke or something like that. Then we see his truck flying in our driveway, and my dad smiles and says, "See, he's right there." I wiped my tears and walked out the door and tell them yes, it was a prank. Inside, I was screaming. I was so embarrassed for myself, because now I look crazy. But if I wanted to save this relationship, they could never know the truth. Months go by, and he starts being sweeter than ever, since we had to be long distance because he was in the military at training. But soon, I would be packing up my life and moving to Texas with him. I could tell my parents were starting to see the cracks I had worked so hard to glue together. My mom even picked up my phone on the table, mistaking it for hers, and saw this huge message from my ex and just started crying, begging me not to stay because he was not a good person. But I assured her that this was way out of character for him, and that he was just lonely. I knew she didn't believe me, but she also knew I was stubborn and was going to do whatever, regardless of her concerns. After just a few weeks in Texas, I knew my life was in danger. It was Thanksgiving Day, and my family just called to check up on us and just tell us Happy Thanksgiving. And the moment I hung up, the man I thought was my soulmate started cussing at me and saying that I need to stop talking to my family because he was my family now. I let out a little chuckle, thinking he's gotta be joking, and he picks up our wedding glasses that I specifically made for us and throws them directly at me, shattering them around me. Shocked, I didn't know what to do, so I walk over with a broom and just start sweeping up the broken glass. You may read this and think surely he would be done throwing a tantrum by now. But no, he then throws picture frames at me while I'm sweeping up the glass. Honestly, that broken glass on the wood floor was just a metaphor for any love I had left towards this man. I broke that night. I stopped seeing him as my other half and more as the monster I'm now stuck with. I became very depressed, and he loved that. He would break me down over and over again just to get a reaction. 2 months go by, and one night, he completely lost his shit over the washer and dryer people messing up the days that they were supposed to come out, and he started pacing back and forth, mumbling words I couldn't quite make out. But then demanded that I call and fix it. He grabbed me and sat me on the couch, telling me what to say and that I better not fuck it up. Like a damn negotiation. This man was paranoid as fuck, making comments that they were doing it because he was a soldier. He then started blaming me, even though I wasn't even around when he first called in the first place, but still yelled at me for hours. Me? I'm on the couch still processing that fucking moment. You're so fucking stupid. This is your fault. Did you plan this with the workers? Just to make me look fucking stupid? Or are you really just that fucking dumb? Huh? You fucking bitch? He says. That's what I fucking thought. You fucking no good ungrateful bitch. I said, you know what? I'm done. You won't do anything except complain and bitch at me, blaming me for everything. All you do is cuss and yell at me for no damn reason. He looked at me with this look that I've heard other victims try and describe. And the best I can describe it as is the darkness in his eyes, like an emptiness that still causes me nightmares to this day. Without hesitation, he lunges at me in the middle of the day, with our curtains open, door wide open, neighbors out and about. He throws me against the wall and starts choking me. I slowly see black, but he lets go only for a second, and then he slammed my entire body to the floor. In the moment, I either blacked out or my brain was trying to shield myself from what was happening. But piece by piece, I would come to, and he was holding me by my shoulders and just repeatedly slamming me on the wood floor. My screams ignored by the people outside. I pleaded for anyone to call the police and repeatedly yelled for help over and over again. My fight or flight takes over and chooses flight. I run to the main bathroom and lock the door, frantically calling my mom, because in that moment, I just wanted to hear her voice, unsure if that would be my last. But my poor mom didn't know the nightmare of that phone call until it was too late. She was with my sister and dad, and she put on speakerphone, because we usually do this so they all can talk to me like we were all together. But instead they hear me screaming for my life and hear my ex calling me awful names and telling me to get my ass in there and to unlock the door. They were confused, and my dad was ready to come kill this asshole himself. But then silence. No more banging, just me softly crying and just trying to calm my mother over the phone, telling her that I am alright and I know I need to leave him, but that I had to do it in the safest way possible, because if he were to catch me, I may not make it out with my life. When I walk out of the room, my ex is just sitting there with a blank stare, like nothing had happened. This was a theme throughout our 3-year relationship, but I could no longer ignore the escalation of his behavior. So, one night, I put my escape plan into action. I was gonna make a run for it. It was 2 a.m. Keys to my Pontiac were on the kitchen table, and he was asleep in the bedroom that I wasn't allowed in several days earlier. I busted out of the guest bedroom, that was my prison, and beelined out the front door, quietly, but as quickly as possible. 9.5 hours to my home state, only stopped once in Dallas to fill up on gas. With every mile in my rearview mirror, I felt something inside that reassured me. I'm free now. Forever scared, but most have healed or faded. I 100% believe, had I stayed, I would be 6 feet deep. So, to my abusive ex-husband, that I fled from that late February night, let's not meet ever again.